Chapter 62. Coming to, Ray had the disorientating feeling that she was a fish in an aquarium. The bed she lay on was in a cylindrical room. She gazed vacantly up at the curved wall rising up and over her. It was made of thick perspex, and the aquamarine of the sea enveloped her. A shoal of small, dart-like fish rushed past, and Ray sat up with a jolt. Dizzy and still drunk, she explored her new bruises and aches, looking around the cylindrical room with some suspicion. Ray stood up, taking care not to make any fast movements. She'd no idea where she was or how she'd got there. A wide steel ladder led up from the subaquatic bedroom to a blurred construction above the water. Ray stared up woozily. It took a moment for her spatial awareness to gather the necessary data and figure it out. She was below deck in one of those seahorse villas. Above her, the rest of the accommodation floated on the ocean surface. Probably a lounge, a kitchen, a jetty, maybe a sunbed terrace on the roof, and these ladders that led down here to the bedroom. She looked at the king-size where she'd blacked out. You could bet your life it was called the seabed. The white sands of the ocean floor lay only a few metres below. Something in the murky blue out there caught her eye. It looked like people were walking around. Ray stared at them and waited for things to make more sense. After a moment, she realised that the 5 or 6 bodies were standing stock still, not moving an inch. Eventually, her brain slugged its way to understanding. They were statues. It was an exhibition of underwater, life-size statues on the seafloor. 2 adults walked on either side of a child, holding hands, midway through swinging their toddler up between them. Another solitary figure looked up to the surface, arms splayed open in cruciform, wing-like coral forming on their back. Another form moved, a swimming figure, floating between the stone statues, kicking through the water, with a stream of silvery bubbles rising and trailing behind them. The figure swam towards the villa, and, even through their goggles and mask, Ray could tell they were looking at her. The diver approached, and from a few feet away, Ray recognised Lance. He steadied himself against the outside of the glass and grinned at her. She could see his eyes now, and, though swollen and magnified through the goggles, they smiled too. Ray put on a confused expression, scratched her head with exaggeration, looked to the bed and back to Lance, then opened her palms out questioningly. He laughed, and a globular balloon of air jumped out of his breathing apparatus. He pointed a finger upwards, then kicked off to the surface. While she waited for him, Ray checked the time. It was early, not long after dawn, which would explain her lingering drunkenness. She only had a few hours before the Dismamona board's metastasis session, and the thought sent a sobering shudder through her. She still hadn't opened the documents Yolanta had sent her about the rig. Still in his long swimming shorts, Lance dripped his way down the ladders with a quick, refreshing energy that couldn't have contrasted more with Ray's fuddled hangover. "Hey, you're up. Great." Seeing Ray, he seemed suddenly self-conscious of his exposed body and quickly wrapped a spacious towel around his chubby protrusions. "Yes, there we go. Right, so, how's the head?" "Ugh, don't ask. You certainly tied one on last night. I've got some Visalgia, if you like." "I like." Lance rummaged around in the jacket he'd hung by the ladders. "Yes, here. Help yourself." Thank you, thank you, thank you." Ray popped 3 pills out of the blister pack and swallowed them dry. She'd still be tired, but at least it would neutralise the alcohol and its effects. Lance, look, I have no idea what happened last night. Where are we? This is your apartment, Ray, and very nice it is too. You ought to stick with your new clients. I'll do my best. How did we get here? Well, first there was a fight at that gathering. Yeah, a woman, right? Uh-huh. There was a woman. There were probably about 6 women, and at least twice as many men. Ray scrunched her face up in confusion. I didn't see what happened exactly, Lance explained, but by the time I got over to you, the whole place had turned into a fight pit. These things tend to escalate. Oh, dear. And the woman? Ray rubbed her bruises. Did I... An impish grin drew itself up her face. Did I win? Ah, well, no. I wouldn't say you won, Ray, no. It was a struggle for him to keep from laughing. By the time I pulled you out of there, you were barely conscious. In fact, the woman you're referring to was actually... He winced at the memory. Yes, let's just say she won that round. And afterwards? Well, after that, how should I put it? Well, you seemed quite keen not to let your defeat ruin the night. On our way out, you grabbed a few bottles of wine. He pointed to an empty bottle at the bottom of the ladders, which you made short work of back here, and he hesitated. And what? Lance looked embarrassed. Oh, you know. What? No, we didn't. But you did sort of suggest it. Suggest it? Well, demand it. Oh, no. You were very drunk. Perhaps a little concussed. Well, what did I... You said, and I quote, you said I ought to slap you in the face with my wonderful love sausage. I believe you also expressed an urge to put one of your breasts in my bottom. I'm not 100% certain. You were more or less incoherent by that point. Then, well, you basically just passed out. No love sausage, then? No. And, mercifully, my bottom escaped unscathed. The Visalgia had lifted the worst of the toxins from Ray's system. Sadly, it did nothing to alleviate the shame or the humiliation. She sat down on the corner of the bed like a scolded dog. If she'd had a tail, it would have been curled between her legs in pathetic submission. I am so sorry. Lance laughed merrily as he donned a chunky dressing gown. I had a great time. Really, you were very funny. Embarrassing? Not at all. I started a bar brawl. It was hilarious. Really. Those bloody events. Brash execs who ought to know better. Fine suits and fancy haircuts. What a pretense. Little more than children. I'm sure more than a few of them deserved a smack bum. We've done worse, haven't we? We've done a lot worse. Remember that time at the academy when the campus security showed up and we'd done shrooms? And they wanted us to turn the music down, but we didn't understand because we thought they were... Hey, you all right? Ray's expression hung from her face like a wet mac on the back of a door. I don't know, she mumbled. It's just... Back then, at the academy, we were... Don't you dare take the piss now. But it felt like we were, I don't know, all together. Lance sat down next to her. Yeah, well, we were. 2 whole years in each other's pockets. I didn't want it to end, you know? Being us. I suppose Reese, Philippa, Martin, Jemima. Oh, sounds so corny, I know, but it felt like home. It felt like we were free. What can I say? You're right. It was bloody brilliant. We were lucky. Thing is, we weren't really free, were we, Lance? It was all just an extended vacation, a holiday from our obligations. Responsibility came knocking, and you guys, I don't know. It seemed like you knew what to do. Everyone but me got their shit together. Decent qualifications, an actual career, marriage, children. I fucking hated how easily it all came to you lot. She looked up at him. You left me behind. And I don't suppose I handled it all that well. Shit, Ray. Lance looked quite moved. I never realised. Well, I never actually said anything, so Ray knew how irrational she'd been. Without her friends around her making the same bad choices as she did each day, she'd become bitter and resentful. It was incredibly childish, now she came to think about it, and she was about to say as much when her eye line rang. It was Yolanta. Ray glanced at Lance apologetically, and keeping him out of frame, answered the call. Good morning, Miss Corridon. You're awake. Ray gave her a brief smile. Yes, I'm awake. It struck Lance that Ray's attitude changed the moment she answered the call. His old friend seemed suddenly heavy, as though after a brief respite she had to sling a weight back onto her shoulders. You received the plans for the rig? Yolanta quizzed her. Mm-hmm. Shouldn't be a problem, Ray lied. Listen, Pascal and I have reconsidered your brief. We appreciate how little information you and your friend have to work with, and although the nature of your assignment is sensitive, we thought it prudent to narrow your focus a little. Oh? Yes. The extra adjustment you'll make. Bringing the rest of the board into line with our proposal. Yolanta narrowed her eyes. Without going into too much detail, it might help to inform you that our proposal refers to the latest viral outbreak. You've heard about it in the news. Rings a bell? Up in the north, right? Well, it's likely to have spread a lot further by now, but yes, that's it. We're not prepared to disclose any further information, but I suppose that's of some use. I guess. It's not as though I've done anything like this before, so I'll take whatever's going. We've every confidence in you and your friend, Ray. You'll do marvellous things together. Think of this as a beginning. Send him our regards. See you soon. Yolanta hung up and left Ray staring blankly at the space above her wrist. Lance cleared his throat and bowed his head in concern. This gig, Ray. She chewed her cheek uncertainly. It isn't, Lance continued, entirely kosher, is it? Her worried look was all the response he needed. Coercing a Panmotech to adjust a cluster to the personal advantage of just a few of its members, he said. A board of directors at that. A fucking dismemona board to boot. I know. Doesn't look great, does it? No, he shook his head. It doesn't. She went back to chewing her cheek for a moment, then looked at him. I don't think I have that much choice, Lance. Yeah, I can see. You're in a bind. But Ray, what they're suggesting, his frown deepened. How's it even possible? And who's this friend of yours?